Undeclared wars are commonplace. Tragically, our government engages in preemptive war, otherwise known as aggression, with no complaints from the American people. Sadly, we have become accustomed to living with the illegitimate use of force by government. To develop a truly free society, the issue of initiating force must be understood and rejected.
What if sometimes, to love your country, you had to alter or abolish the government? What if Jefferson was right? What if that government is best which governs least? What if it is dangerous to be right when the government is wrong? What if it is better to perish fighting for freedom than to live as a slave? What if freedom's greatest hour of danger is now?
Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Tuesday, March 3rd, 2026. Matt Ho joined us now. Matt, thank you very much. I'm going to start by reading an unbelievable post that you just posted on X. You would think that with a $1 trillion military budget, 175,000 Marines, and more than 30 amphibious warfare ships and 11 aircraft carriers, the United States would be able to have 2,000 Marines on 3 ships in the Middle East to assist with such things as embassy and non-combatant evacuations, as has been done many, many times. But the U.S. can't do that because its military is overextended. Its defense budget is assembled primarily as pork for corporations. The U.S. defense industry can only build ships and planes that are maintenance nightmares, and its leaders, uniformed and civilian, are incompetent yes men. I thought of you yesterday when Secretary of State Rubio walked out of the skiff in the Capitol building, having just briefed the Gang of Eight on the supposed imminent danger. The first question that was asked of Rubio was, do you need more money? More money? $1 trillion budget. Take it from there.
Thanks for having me on, Judge. I mean, no matter which way you come at this thing being this war with Iran, it's confounding, it's maddening, it's unwise, it's completely to proportion or reason, except for it's a grift, it's a racket. And whether that be this is done to enhance the interests of the military-industrial complex, to enhance the interests of eventually the fossil fuel industry, or to serve the ideological interests of both Americans and Israelis, as well as, say, Israel's larger plan for expansion and dominance of the Middle East. You know, if you're not part of those cliques, if you're not part of those clubs, this makes no sense to you because this war is simply so unsound on so many levels. One of those being is that we just simply don't have the forces. We simply don't have the capabilities. We don't have the leadership to carry out, to sustain, and to win a war as any government or state or empire in the past would consider necessary to do so. In this case, my tweet was about the understanding, as was published today in American media, that U.S. embassies across the Middle East are telling Americans, including embassy employees, we can't evacuate you. You're on your own. Now, traditionally, the American Navy and Marine Corps has what are called amphibious ready groups. And these are 3 or 4 ships with about 2,000 Marines and helicopters and warplanes that are located around the world. And normally, or at least over the decades, we've always had one in Asia, one in the Arabian Sea and Persian Gulf, and one in the Mediterranean Sea. We don't have any near the Middle East right now. The one amphibious ready group, or they're also what's called a Marine Expeditionary Unit. The one we have is in the Caribbean that's been there, that was moved from the Mediterranean to the Caribbean last late summer or early fall to prepare for and ultimately take part in the operation to kidnap Nicolas Maduro. Meanwhile, the United States launches a war against Iran without any amphibious ready groups anywhere near the region that So you don't have that emergency force of Marines. This is one of the missions of the Marine Corps, to do things like that, available to take on any type of contingencies, such as having to, say, evacuate American citizens from a war zone.
Wow. Well, why would the planning for this, which has obviously been in the works for a while, at least since December 29th or 30th, when Prime Minister Netanyahu visited the president at his home in Mar-a-Lago, why wouldn't the planning for this include the safety and security of American government workers who are civilians?
I mean, I think the easy answer is that the leadership just simply doesn't care, whether it's the political leadership, the uniformed leadership, even the career civilians simply just don't care anymore. They're immune or unbothered by the realities of American citizens in these countries. It doesn't matter to them. I think that the issue you get to is, how did the planners just simply gloss over it, besides this apathy, maybe. And now you get to what I mentioned there in that post, Judge, this idea that we have a military that's overextended. We simply don't have the ships available. We have a defense industry that builds ships and planes that just simply don't work, that spend way more time in the maintenance yards or in the docks than they do at sea. Okay, so this is why we don't have the ships available. We also don't have the ships available, as well as the Marines available, because we've got them doing things like kidnapping Nicolas Maduro, rather than taking part in operations that will protect American citizens. And then finally, the reason why you don't have this force available, and you've got headlines all throughout the American press today about how Americans are just basically being abandoned by the U.S. government as Iranian missiles and drones come down all around them, is because you have simply incompetent yes men at the Pentagon, at the State Department, at the National Security Council, who are going to go along with whatever Donald Trump wants them to. Let's remember that General Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, was pulled out of retirement. I mean, they couldn't even find a yes man with a big enough aptitude to say yes within the active ranks, which is startling, because that's essentially all our general officers and admirals are yes men. But they wanted to find one who was certain in his loyalty to Donald Trump. So they pulled Kane off of retirement to come in and be the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And let's all remember the thing about Kane that we believe Trump likes so much is the fact that when he met Kane one time while Kane was still in uniform, Kane was wearing a MAGA hat while he was in his Air Force uniform.
Well, that would be a violation of regulations, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just from day one in the military, you learn that those things don't mix, those things don't cross.
Right.
And so what the judge, what I think that the thing about this for you and I and all the folks watching here, where does this go? You see, how did these generals and admirals get to the position they're in? Well, they got to the position they're in by keeping their mouths shut about the failures of the Iraq and Afghan war, going along with the Libya war and the great catastrophe of the war in Syria, going along with a Pentagon that just takes in more and more money, but it can't produce weapons or vehicles or ships or planes that actually work, let alone it can't pass an audit. That's how you get to the top. Keep your mouth shut and do what the boss says.
Right. Let me ask you big picture before we get too granular about the military, and I want to do that. But big picture, what is your take on this war of choice?
I think it's something that, well, first of all, let's say I think, Judge, that the leadership in the White House and throughout Washington, D.C. simply don't know what they want, and let alone how they're going to get it. We see contradictory statements coming from Trump, from Rubio, from Hegseth. Yesterday we had Rubio saying that we launched this war because we had to, because U.S. forces would have been attacked if Israel had attacked Iran. So we preemptively launched to protect our forces. Now, today, Donald Trump just said we launched this war because Iran was going to get a nuclear weapon within a month. I mean, they don't even have their story straight. If you read the statement the White House released today, giving the 4 objectives of the war, it contradicts what other statements have said, what key figures in the administration have said. So they can't even get their message straight on what they want to accomplish here. If they can't even tell the media what they're trying to do, then what the heck did they tell their military planners what they wanted to accomplish? I think what the plan was, if there was one, I think it was that we're going to do an operation similar to Venezuela. We're going to take the leader out, and then everybody is going to fall in line, and we've got regime change. However, Donald Trump twice now, he said it over the weekend, he said it again today, that the people they had in mind to replace the Ayatollah in Iran, we killed. So what the heck is going on here? I mean, if that was the plan, which we're not even sure it was, but that's the best thing we can kind of assume at this thing, then they carry out this plan, but they immediately kill the people who are supposed to replace the Ayatollah that they had in mind. I mean, so just at that top level, this brain trust that is running this war, I mean, if this doesn't inspire confidence in the Iranians to outlast us, I don't know what else would. You know what I mean? So I think that's what I'm looking at most here, Judge, is just frankly, the incompetence, the vainglory, the idiocy at our senior levels, you know, among our leadership. You know, we can get into the aspects of how Israel is involved with this. Certainly the idea is if the Americans want regime change, how are they going to pursue that? But I mean, mostly I'm just fascinated with how incompetent and idiotic and vainglorious American leadership is. I mean, you never thought that Bush and Rumsfeld and Cheney would be surpassed, but these guys certainly have done it.
How long can the Navy hold out? I mean, can they be resupplied with food, medicine, and ammunition, or are they stuck with whatever was on board when they arrived there?
No, they can be replenished both underway. So tanker ships can come up and pass them fuel, you know, through hoses. You know, you have the ability to airlift by helicopter, you know, emergency supplies onto these ships. But in terms of actually rearming them, of giving them more missiles, you know, whether they be missiles to attack Iran or to defend the ships themselves, very often they have to go into port from that. They have some ability to do that via other ships, but they may like to go into port. And the problem is you've got roughly about a third of the Navy deployed right now. And you would think, okay, that makes sense. You've got a third deployed. You've got a third that is in the shipyards for maintenance. And you've got another third that is getting ready to deploy. So you've got a nice cycle of one, you know, of thirds there. But no, what we're seeing is, what we understand is that the majority of American ships are in the ports for maintenance, many of them for significant maintenance that takes many months or years, and that the idea of just rotating ships through isn't going to work the way that you would assume it would work if you put it down on paper. So how long, and this goes the same for our aircraft, you know, our aircraft, our combat aircraft, as well as the support aircraft, which we have very few of. They have maintenance rates or what you can call availability rates that run 30 to 50% for these different airplanes. So say you have 100 F-22s in the fleet or whatever the number is. On any given day, only 30 to 50 of those planes are going to be available. I mean, so you start doing the math of how long can you sustain that until you actually start to really run out of aircraft. So if the plan is to have regime change, if you didn't get it right away, you do an intensive strike, you don't get your regime change right away, then you settle into a sustained campaign, maybe similar to what the United States did with Iraq from 1991 to 2003, where most people forget this, but during that time, the United States was bombing Iraq every third or fourth day on the average. So you continue to provide these bombings, you continue to destroy Iranian military facilities, infrastructure, basically stirring the pot with the idea that somehow there's going to be a groundswell against the government and that there's going to be regime change that way. Or if you don't get regime change, and this is what's so sickening, is I think in Washington, D.C. and Tel Aviv, The desire, if not regime change, then civil war, then destroy Iranian society, get the Iranians to fight amongst themselves, support various sectarian groups there, whether it be the Kurds or the Baluchs or whoever, and make Iran in 2026 look like Syria in 2013 or 2014. And if 500,000 Iranians are killed in this civil war, so be it, because then the Iranian state can't threaten Israel. It can't have a presence in the region, and it spends all its time trying to keep itself in power or trying to control its own country. And so I think that's what they're looking at in a sense of trying to achieve their objectives. But again, if you look at the statement, Judge, that came out today from the White House, the 4 objectives that they put on paper were destroying the ballistic missiles, destroying the Navy, which is a new one. I have not heard in the last several weeks anyone mention the Iranian Navy, but today the White House saying it's their number 2 priority is to destroy the Iranian Navy.
The first I heard of that was last night on Sean Hannity out of Steve Witkoff's mouth. Entirely new.
Yeah, it is literally, Judge, they're making it up as they're going along here. The third is the idea of getting rid of the proxy, or ending Iran's relationship with its allies in the region. And then the fourth is the nuclear weapons. And I noticed that in that statement today, they said nuclear weapons program. So are the Americans retreating from this idea of no nuclear program at all? A civilian program's okay, but not a military one? Or is this just a case where the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing, and whoever put out this statement, isn't coordinated with anyone at state or at the NSC or the Pentagon, or let alone, what the president's thinking?
Here's Congressman Jason Crow of Colorado. If the name rings a bell, it's because he was one of the 6 who made the video telling members of the military that they have a duty to disobey illegal orders, and the Justice Department tried to indict him and the other 5, and a grand jury said no. But this is an excellent summary, I think, of where we are now. I'd be happy to hear your thoughts on it. Chris, number 28.
Well, the real justification for this, please stand up. Because one moment it's regime change, another moment it's some undefined, unverifiable imminent threat. Another moment it's somebody else who's going to start this war, so we need to start it before they do. It is changing by the hour and by the person, depending upon who you talk to. And it's madness. It's madness. We now have multiple countries being hit. This is spreading throughout the region. Gas prices are up. The stock market is plunging. American service members are being killed. We have 50,000 servicemen and women from the United States in this region who are sitting in bunkers, being bombarded with drones and missiles. We don't know, I don't know, sitting here today, whether or not we have the munitions and the capability to protect them in the weeks and months ahead. It is madness, which is exactly why Donald Trump is unfit to be in this position to do this, right? He is trying to project power. He's making decisions without consulting people, making decisions without a plan. Americans, our troops deserve far better than this.
Judge, we've talked before about how very often this administration, not just this term, but also the previous term, resembles Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger's madman theory. The idea that if you act crazy, you'll throw your adversaries off balance. They won't know what you're going to do. They'll think you're unpredictable, that you might do anything. And then in that uncertainty, your adversaries will make mistakes that you can take advantage of. But that, of course, for Nixon and Kissinger, I mean, I think, they were war criminals, but I don't know if they were mad or not. In this case, though, you have certainly a president who is a madman. This is no feigning. This is no stunt. This is no attempt to deceive here. We're dealing with someone who simply doesn't know what he wants. You have the White House today saying that they no longer want to negotiate. 2 days ago, they want to negotiate. Again, we talked about the fact that they wanted the regime change and they had an idea of who they wanted to put in power, but then they killed those people. And then just today, Donald Trump said he has an idea of who he wants to put in power, but we're also just attacked the leadership there. I mean, the whole thing is just upside down from any which way. So the idea of how we get through this of where this goes. And one of the things too, I think that we see with this, and I had a conversation this morning with Ian Proud. I think Ian's been on your program a number of times, Judge.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, he's great. And, the discussion we were having was the idea of the way the Americans approach this on a very tactical or operational level, where we're concerned about the number of missiles fired, right? The number of planes we have in the region, how many buildings in Tehran we bombed today, right? How many leaders did we kill? Not concern about the larger political aspects of this. And where we don't have a policy that way, the Iranians seem to. So the Iranians seem to understand how to influence this war in a way that meets their political objectives. So they're fighting this war asymmetrically. The Iranians seem to be counting on not Iranian military might or missiles or drones stopping this war, but rather the fact that the war has been expanded, and the Iranians successfully did that on day one throughout the region, and that the pressure that will come on the United States to end this war will come from U.S. allies in the Middle East, as well as the entire world economy that will stop screaming as 20% of the world's oil and 20% of its liquid natural gas can't go through the Straits of Hormuz. So it seems that if the Iranians actually have a strategy here based upon their political objectives, how they're going to achieve that. And the Americans, we don't have anything more than the constant drumbeat of we fired 50 Tomahawk missiles, we shot down 100 Iranian missiles, we're bombing this, tomorrow we're going to bomb that, with no idea of actually how to put that all together to provide the real political pressure on the Iranians to force them to make a decision to capitulate. Yeah, I don't see how the Americans achieve that. Again, best case they have is this idea of continuing to sustain this war, this campaign for months to come, stirring the pot essentially, and hoping that somehow a civil war appears in Iran. That seems to be the wish or the desire. And I use those terms because it's based upon what,
Yeah. One of the more bizarre arguments that some of Trump's apologists have made, and hang on to your chair, is that this is not a war.
Oh, man.
Here they are. Our friends at CNN put together a montage of these characters. Chris, number 25.
And we may have casualties. That often happens in war.
I don't know if this is technically a war.
We didn't start this war, but under President Trump, we are finishing it.
This isn't a war. We haven't declared war.
The Secretary of Defense, who calls himself the Secretary of War, said today this is a war.
We set the terms of this war from start to finish.
Nobody should classify this as war. It is combat operations.
War is hell and always will be.
Strategic strikes are not war.
So they're Orwell on steroids. If it's not a war, then of course the moral, constitutional, and legal implications don't have to be addressed.
Yeah,
they should be ashamed of themselves. So most of those people are ex-military, by the way.
Right.
One of them, I forget his name.
Brian Matt. Yeah, Brian Matt.
Right.
Yeah.
He has worn an IDF uniform on the floor of the House of Representatives. Now, I don't know if he's a former member of the IDF. The poor guy lost his legs. I've been with him in my days at Fox. He must have lost them in the U.S. military, not in the Israeli military, but yet he wears an Israeli military uniform on Capitol Hill.
Right. I mean, well, tens of thousands of Americans served in the Israeli army during the genocide in Gaza. I mean, the dual citizenship between Israel and America, of course, is thorough, right?
There he is. There's Congressman Mast on Capitol Hill. I don't know who the gentleman is with him, but that's him in one of the House office buildings.
Right. And so my understanding is that after Mast got out of the American military, he joined the Israeli military. Whether he actually participated in any way, he had already lost his legs at that point. So who knows in what capacity, other than he has the uniform and he has a rank and he has a title, he serves as some type of reservist over there. But the idea that he would wear that uniform in the halls of Congress. Hey, Judge, when I was in the Secretary of Navy's office. I was a Marine Corps captain in the Secretary of Navy's office. I was I was the White House liaison officer for the Marine Corps. I also had to go to Congress quite a bit. I wasn't allowed to wear my uniform over to Congress. The Marines that we had working in Congress didn't wear uniforms. They wore suits. All service members did, because the idea of the uniform military presence on the Capitol grounds in Washington, D.C. was anathema to our system of civilian control of the U.S. military. The fact that the military was not involved in policy, and it certainly was not part of our democracy in any type of decision-making way. And so, having been a Marine Corps officer who was told you can't wear your uniform to the Capitol building, to then see many years later a congressman wearing the uniform of a foreign state proudly with bravado through the halls, boasting of it. I mean, it's absolutely sickening, but it also too is just emblematic of where we are. Again, we're this is a class that we have ruined. I will say this, Judge, and this is a bit off color, but Fuad Azadi, who is a professor in Tehran, he described the Iranian war against the Americans as a war against the Epstein class that either rapes little girls or kills them. And, you know, putting this all together, is there a lot of pushback? I can give that. Can I really say, no, no, Mr. Professor, no, you don't understand this? Or with everything we've spoken about now and everything we've spoken about in the past and all that we don't talk about, does that summarization of the United States' war and who is waging this war against Iran make sense to us? And I think it does.
Here's some nonsense from Senator Cruz. This is on Sunday. Chris, cut number 5.
The president himself campaigning on and saying in his inaugural address that there would be no more wars. And there were a fair number of Republicans who voted for him, liking that promise.
So I will say your quote of the president was slightly off. He did not say there would be no more wars. He said there would be no more forever wars. Those are very different things. I emphatically agree with him. You are not going to see a major U.S. troop presence in Iran. He and I talked about that on Friday, talked about Israel leading many of the attacks. We talked about targeted airstrikes, taking out the military capacity of the regime to attack the protesters. And I also urged arming the protesters so the people of Iran could fight back, because they were
Is that going to happen? That was one of my questions. Is the U.S. going to help them?
I hope so. I do not know for sure. I did not get a clear answer on that. That is what I advocated for.
Really crazy.
Well, I'll upset you, Judge. That could be the next Supreme Court justice we just saw there.
Yes, it could.
Right?
Yes, it could.
We're not seeing protesters. Maybe there have been, but we've not seen that in any reliable reporting coming out of Iran. We have seen is mass demonstrations in support of the Iranian government, but more especially demonstrations in support of the Iranian people. You had hundreds of thousands of people turn out under the open skies after it was announced that Ayatollah Khamenei was killed. But then even more so, particularly today, if people have seen the video of the people who've turned out for the funeral of those, 158 girls that were killed by either an American or an Israeli.
This is their funeral scene. This has got to be more than 1 million people, Matt.
And this is occurring in the midst of this war. There is, anyone who's been paying attention at all to the last several decades, go back through Vietnam, go back through Korea. The Americans have no. The Americans are entirely willing to kill civilians. The Israelis, that's how they operate. The Israelis have entire doctrines built around killing civilians. And so for these people to show up in the multitude like that, under the open sky, it shows just not an element of mourning, right, of solidarity, with those little girls that were killed, but it also shows a defiance. And so how many of those people do you think, Judge, if you asked them, do you like this government? Would you like something different? Yeah, probably a lot of them would say, sure. How many of them are going to do that, though, when the United States and Israel are bombing them and telling them we are killing your little girls so that we can give you freedom? I mean, the insipidness, the stupidity, just the total sense of, or the lack of rationality, reason, and accountability throughout our entire political and media establishment. And I think Ted Cruz and Dana Bash there on CNN highlight that. Is just, I mean, if this pride doesn't lead to our downfall, I don't know what will.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks for your excellent analysis. You're very valuable to us. And we'll look forward to seeing you next week, sooner if developments warrant it. Thank you, my dear friend.
Thank you, Judge.
Of course. And coming up at 3 o'clock today on all of this, with a little bit of a twist, guess who's off the front pages these days? Epstein. Who else? Colonel Karen Kwiatkowski, Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.